Okay, good morning and a very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to our final week in our webinar series. And today we are going to be looking at the topic of leadership and motivation, with a particular focus on empowering people. Joining us for today's session are two very experienced leaders in their own right who are going to share their experiences and their insights with you today. Fergal McCormack is going to speak to you first, and Fergal is a chartered accountant. He's managing director of PKF FPM, but really I suppose in his capacity today he's here to talk about his experiences in leadership, which have been varied across a wide range of businesses, charities, the GAA, and a whole host of different types of organisations. And really, I suppose, from what I've heard in our prep meetings, central to Fergal's philosophy is the importance of people. So I can hear echoes of what Donald Daly was talking about last week about, put your employees first. And if you look after your employees, they look after your customers. So really interested and excited. And I suppose testament to the leadership qualities that Fergal has. He's brought his own crew today. So a very warm welcome to those of you who are joining us. I know Lauren sent out the invitation to a number of friends, clients and colleagues of Fergal's. So you are all very welcome to today's webinar. We hope you enjoy it, and do feel free to check out the other webinars, which are all up on our website, griffith.ie. Following on from Fergal's talk, we're going to be joined by Dennis Walensky. Dennis is a colleague of mine. He is a lecturer on our MBA programme in the Graduate Business School in Griffith College. And Dennis is best known to me for lecturing leadership and management development to our MBA students, but he also has a very varied and interesting life history, I suppose, with a background that spans media, politics, PR, and has held significant leadership roles himself in organisations during periods of rapid change and major change projects. So, for example, as Director of Ofcom for Northern Ireland and National Management Manager for Digital UK. So I'm really excited, having chatted to the two guys a few times over the last couple of weeks for today's session. I suppose an interesting anecdote is that although we are all socially distanced and we're coming to you online, Fergal and Dennis are actually geographically quite close to each other, both living in Warrenpoint and both in lockdown up there. So they don't know each other that well, but it's just funny to see that we're bringing people together in their own localities, even when we're so far apart. So without further ado, we'll get started. I'm going to hand you over to Fergal. And I know, Fergal, you have a little bit to set up there if you want to come on camera and come on mic, and we'll get you set up and ready to go.
Okay, Eilish, I must say, Eilish, I was delighted when Eilish invited me, indeed honoured, to be the final speaker in their 10-part webinar series on Restart Your Business, Rethink Your Strategy. And I'm delighted to share the presentation today with Griffith College lecturer and facilitator Dennis Walensky. The topic that I was asked to speak on was leadership and motivation. Empower your people, achieve your goals. And in that context, I propose to share with you my PKF FPM experience and indeed observations over the past 30 years, both in working in partnership with many organizations, but also as a director and non-executive director of both business and not-for-profit organizations, including my recent term as president of Chartered Accountants Ireland. I'm also very conscious that there are people joining us in the webinar today who will have forgotten more than I'll ever know. So in sharing with you my own experiences, I can assure you I am not for one moment suggesting these are the sole or the right way. I'm suggesting they're one way. So maybe we'll try and make a start. And to be fair, leadership and caring and empowering your team is a topic very close to my heart. I truly believe that it's up to leaders to set a caring ethos at the highest levels and to show their personal commitment to their team in everything they do. And why? Because this leads to a happier, more highly motivated staff, but also better outcomes for the business, and it helps you achieve your goals, interlinking the themes of today's presentation. Just a bit of background on myself. I'm married to Anne, and we have 2 children. Rory on the left is 20. He's just completing his second year on the BCom at UCD. And Seamus is 25. Seamus is severely autistic. We're fortunate to have him at home in self-contained accommodation with carers and respite, etc. My life has been a journey of learning and indeed leadership experiences. And I was fortunate, looking back now, to establish my own practice back in 1991, a one-man business with a part-time secretary with no clients. I used to walk up and down to the furthest newsagent shop in the morning and in the evening, and walk back again meeting people, and they'd say, "You busy?" Very busy. I didn't read the paper, but it did teach me initially the importance of people and relationships. And from that, I've been very fortunate to have the support of an inspiring and great team, now about 120 people operating from 5 offices across the island in terms of business advisory, tax accountancy, and rescue and restructuring, etc. So sufficient about me. Obviously, the evolving COVID pandemic means that we are currently living and working in unprecedented and extraordinary times. And with the prospect of social distancing continuing in some form or other for the foreseeable future, there is no doubt that the economic implications across the island are going to be very challenging. But they pale in comparison to the public health and human cost that we are all observing around us. It is acknowledged that both governments, South and North, have brought in business supports to help businesses, employers and employees, which will help. But our business environment remains very uncertain and, as we all know, probably very challenging. And in order to manage the inherent risks and fears that COVID-19 presents, we need to quickly move past the shock of the pandemic to active leadership and control measures. And I believe that the most important leadership or employee control that any of us has is how we behave. We inspire people by our own actions. And therefore, more than ever, we need empathetic and compassionate leadership which engages, listens, and connects with others and displays flexibility and understanding to get people through the crisis and to lead them through this period of uncertainty to a new reality, which, if we're being honest, none of us know where that will be yet. Right now, I suggest, to alleviate workplace fear, it is paramount that leaders focus on being objective, transparent, and indeed authentic. It's interesting that the Harvard Business Review recently reported that crises are more often overmanaged and underled. Yes, we all need to avoid the urge to jump in and to firefight at the operational level. We've got to trust our team. Leadership decisions today can be the difference, remember, between a motivated staff or not when operations resume, and thankfully they will, because we know coronavirus, albeit it may not appear just at present, is temporary. So in terms of today's presentation, at the outset, may I suggest we need to throw our ego out the window, because to be honest with you, we've got to face reality. Customers and clients aren't really interested in us. And there's a danger that our ego could be an anchor holding us back to developing great client and customer relationships, because arrogance is not a recipe for success. Through this presentation, we hope to make successful leaders and businesses even more successful by sharing with you some proven business practices that I've observed over the years. But it's fair to say that no performance is good enough, that we have to set the bar high and embark upon a journey of continuous improvement towards business improvement, business excellence, and organization excellence. We need to think globally about our business, and thankfully the island of Ireland has been very successful in recent years about thinking globally. And we need to look at the opportunities and threats to be prepared to change with changing circumstances. Agility and embracing change are key to survival, and certainly in the current environment. And in my experience, successful leaders have a hunger for success, an eye for opportunity. They are good team players, very good. Someone once said to me, the key to a leader is to make sure you surround yourself with very able and talented people. And they have huge reserves of confidence and persistence. Indeed, I often quote the term persistence beats resistance. Leaders must urgently embrace lateral thinking, to help their businesses sidestep, survive, and perhaps even capitalize upon the turbulent times we are currently experiencing. It's now 29 years ago, believe it or not, since I was asked to give my first presentation. I remember, excuse me, very well. I was asked, believe it or not, to be new language to be then the keynote speaker at the Irish Student Accountancy Conference, which was then being held in the Sleeve Donard Hotel in Newcastle. And I was asked to pick my own topic. And I picked the topic, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And a few times during that week, I got a few phone calls to say, did we get it right? This is an accountancy conference. Well, I can assure you they did get it right. And I think that more so now than ever, that business is all about people and relationships, and not only business, indeed life is. I particularly like two quotes from two American business gurus. The first being from Daniel Gilbert from Harvard, who says, what distinguishes great leaders from merely good ones isn't IQ or technical skills, it's emotional intelligence. And Bill Walsh said, the most important attribute of an organization is the way it treats its people. So true. So leadership is all about having the ability to influence. And the most important thing, I believe, is purpose. And that is the why. And we're going to come back to that later, the why, not the what and not the how. And remembering that without a vision, you can't get high performance on a consistent basis. Yes, values are pivotal and cultivate performance. It's all about servicing and caring. Indeed, our 2020 theme is earning trust. Now, there's no doubt about it that within the informality of structure, there must always be formal structures as well and processes. And certainly within our own practice, we've developed a tool which we call the PKFFPM Rocket. It's a strategic management tool, but believe it or not, you could do this in the back of an envelope. I see people telling me about weeks and weeks of strategic planning and plans. I personally like short, concise documents, but to be upfront about it, there has to be a vision. Then there needs to be a strategy, structure, culture. Culture is key, and we'll come back to that. And then again, to be honest with you, you have people making things difficult. I think it's very simple. I have yet to see any business that you can't roughly define their operational activities into 5 core segments. And again, then have implementation strategy for products and services, for marketing and sales, for systems and processes, for finance, physical and resources, and above all, for managing your people. So what do? Well, I see my role as managing director to lead, to mobilize and energize our most vital resources, people, to foster trust and a business development culture that inspires and seeks out opportunities and supports greatness among our team members, to ensure that everyone, it's very simple, is rowing in the same direction for the greater good. And we've got to ensure that diversity and inclusion are embedded within our core values, to give strategic direction, to implement our agreed agile strategy. Now, we happen to use a system to glue it together called the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, to implement our vision. And that actually is outlined in a book called Traction by a guy called Gina Weinman. Very good book to give what we would call positive results, or you could call that positive benefits to clients, and deliver sustainable business growth. Now, within that, obviously, we're trying to foster that diversity and inclusion we talked about before, but we're also trying to recognize that business is played primarily in the mind, and that character triumphs over talent. Winning takes talent, but ask Jim Galvin to repeat it takes character. Now, I'm not going to bore you, but we've been fortunate over the years, and I think it's no coincidence since we started to put a greater emphasis on people and culture, that as a practice we've won a number of awards, including recently the Best Firm of the Year at the British Accountancy Awards and the Employer of the Year, and once again in the Sunday Times Top 100 companies. But stand back for a second. I believe that the quality of leadership, more than any other factor, determines the success or failure of an organization. And leadership is not about hierarchy, but it's about attitude. It's about definite characteristics of behaviours, such as vision, passion, culture, people skills. We can go on, resilience. Above all, it's about inspiring others. And it's appropriate for real leaders to stand up at all levels of the organisation and deliver. It's important from day one that we avoid complacency. Some might say I don't believe you should tear up your medals or throw them away. But I will say one thing, past success does not guarantee your future success. So make sure you don't look in the past. You learn from the past, but move forward. So it's leadership first and then management. And you know, if you think about it, George Bernard Shaw was right when he said, the only golden rule is there is no rule. Now, unfortunately, it took me a long time in life, perhaps towards later in life, to my 59 years, that I appreciated this, that there are no golden rules. Yes, there is a framework, but we need to stay flexible and adapt to changing circumstances. And it's equally important to appreciate that leadership comes from within, but must be recognized by others. And you know, if I look at our most successful clients, and indeed you can take the skins off most businesses and they're relatively the same. It's the ones where the business leaders lift themselves out of the mundane tasks and work on the business rather than in the business. You know, it's the ones that aren't always busy. Whenever you ask them to do anything, to go in a court, oh, I'm too busy, I'm too busy. Well, maybe that's the problem. You're too busy being a fool. So I would suggest to you work on the business rather than in the business. And again, I'd equally suggest to you, do not engage in negativity and have the courage to tell your work colleagues to disengage from negativity. It's just a few weeks ago, I was chairing a not-for-profit organization, and there were a few people whinging. I adjourned the meeting and said, this meeting will only restart with people who want to talk positively of how we can change things. So speak up very quick and be brave and discourage your colleagues from speaking negatively. I think there's another very important thing to do and to consider. You know, if you have to do everything, well, then you're not a good leader. If you cannot delegate, you are a nuisance. Now, let's think about that. If you cannot delegate, you are a nuisance. Now, as a leader, if you pick the team, if you've employed the team, if you're not willing to delegate and empower the team, well, then your business only has limited success. It's you. Oh, you're knocked down by a bus, there's no business. So you must delegate or you're a nuisance. And that's very important because some people think that only they can do it well. Well, give other people a chance. And as a leader, you're judged by the outputs of your team rather than the, I think I've done something wrong here, but we'll sort it out now. You know, who's going to help me here, Hank?
Yeah, what's...
Just knock me on to the next slide there.
Just try and click on your screen. And you're there, and then try press it again.
That's sure. Sorry. Yeah, so there you go. It's great to have people behind you. Thank you, Eilish. So that's another thing I've learned, actually, pronunciation. Eilish in Dublin will be pronounced quite often Eilish up here in the north, albeit I realise it's I think Elizabeth in Irish, if I'm right. Yeah. So in terms of leadership, I think it's important to recognise that a couple of things. Within the corporate setting, first of all, that leadership is centred on the ability to change, and that only adaptive organisations will survive in today's rapidly changing environment. Now, it's also important that in the landscape we're in now, that ethics should be embedded at the heart of every organisation. And we've got to hold ourselves accountable and expect the same from others. And if you think about it, a few years ago, the whole motto was a can-do attitude. Bob the Builder, can I do it? Yes, I can. Well, I would suggest to you now that has changed. And it's no longer can I do it, but the key question is, should I do it? And perhaps we'll only realise 2 or 3 years later. So ethics must now be embedded in the business landscape. Yes, we've got to treat people with respect and dignity and build strong, trusting relationships, both internal and external, and inspire confidence, because once we inspire confidence, people will push the boundaries out. Yes, as we've already highlighted a number of times, we must be prepared to be agile and to change with changing circumstances. There can be no shortcuts. With the will, you can do almost everything. Without the will, there's not much you can do. So really, we referred to earlier the importance of culture, and business culture reflects the style within an organization. And there definitely are clear benefits to having a strong, united culture underlying your operations. First of all, in terms of identity, for starters, culture contributes to the identity and value of the business. It also, in terms of retention, it's a strong company culture attracts better talent and, more importantly, retains that talent and enhances the chemistry among team members. We all know the costs of training someone and then leaving, or the cost of recruiting. And finally, it's very important from an image perspective because it adds to your brand identity. For example, at PKF we care and treat our team members well, and we have a listening and fun-loving corporate atmosphere. Now, you may ask, what is a staff pulse survey? Well, believe it or not, every week since June 2015, and we're still doing it, we do a weekly pulse survey of all our staff, and it's coordinated independently in Nottingham in England. And it asks a simple question: how's it going? And you give a comment, you give a mark 1 to 10, and you have the opportunity to make a comment. Nothing has been more significant in my 30 years in business than this survey. It's phenomenal. For example, last week, in the middle of the COVID virus, we scored 8.92. That's nearly our highest ever score. And I can assure you, I find it straight in the nut. I look at it every Sunday, preparing for Monday morning. Exactly, if somebody's not happy or something's going wrong, it's amazing how you find out from that survey. And certainly, I think the fact that your staff know you're listening, and more importantly, you're taking actions following their comments, is very important to staff morale. I've gone.
Yeah, just try it again there to click on the main screen, Fergal, and then try.
So in terms of implementation, thank you, Eilish. It's good I have somebody to help me, I can assure you, but for that's what teamwork's all about. Businesses, in terms of implementation, execute, and this is really important because implementation is the key here. You know, a plan that doesn't deliver is a worthless plan. So business is all about people and relationships, that we said, but it's about encouraging engagement, accountability, and respecting diversity among the key pillars, which we'll talk about later. And everything matters and everything counts. Thus, we've got to commit to doing everything to the best of our ability. And we'll come back to that later on briefly as well. And there must be tenacity to implement the execution of the plan in order to get the desired results. And if you think about it, business thrives when both effectiveness and efficiency are alive and come together and complement each other. So what do we mean by effectiveness? Well, in very simple terms, we mean doing the right things, strategic, working on the business. And what do we mean by efficiency? Well, we mean doing things right, which is operational and tactics, working in the business. Now, I don't plan to go into this slide today, but it's fair to say that all leaders must be multidisciplinary. And as a business organization over the years, we have found that, irrespective of size, that these are the 7 most important integrative factors that determine a successful business. Obviously, leadership, which we're talking about today, and getting the teamwork right, but then becoming, much as I'd love to tell you otherwise, as an accountant, but you got to first of all sell. If you don't have any sales, you don't have any business. So you got to be proactive with the selling process, customer and sales driven. You got to have a commitment to, obviously, innovation and IT and the whole area of digitalization and artificial intelligence coming in. You've got to differentiate yourself from your competitors. And certainly in our own case, we've made significant investments and efforts in recent years in our whole area of social media. And we're now going, believe it or not, live streaming with PKF TV. Cost control and working capital, which is for another day. Yes, managing change in challenging circumstances. And finally, people management, which we're going to talk about a fair bit as we go on the presentation. So I would like just to pause for a second and let's think about this. Our present circumstances don't determine where we go. They merely determine where we start. Now, I think that's a very profound comment. And if you think about it, Barack and Michelle Obama, look at the humble beginnings they started in, and they went on to become nearly the most powerful family in the world. So remember, any of us can do this. Any of us can achieve this. No matter where we are now, that's irrelevant. That's the baseline. It merely determines where we start. And our motivation in life and business should be to serve and to help others, because the secret to success in business is wanting to help others to win and achieve their dreams and quality of life aspirations. That's important. Please be careful. We're not telling them what we do here. We're not selling features. We're promoting benefits. And then to deliver results and positive change in terms of impact and solutions for existing and potential clients. You know, it was Winston Churchill who once said, "You make a living out of what you get, but you make a life out of what you give." And I suppose St. Francis said it in different ways. He said, "It is in giving we receive." And I think he also said, "The door to happiness opens outwards." And in my experience, and unfortunately, I've concluded this quite a few years ago now, that people fall into two categories, and it's very hard to change them. There's those who give you energy, and there's those who take your energy away. And the sooner you get rid of or you part company with those who take your energy away, you'll have made the right decision. But behind every successful business, there are great leaders. And it's the leaders, and this is the leaders at all levels, who give a company direction, who motivate and inspire the workforce, who even in the face of adversity, COVID-19, they see the opportunities. And in my view, there are certain traits that are common among our greatest leaders. And these are very simple traits. We call them the 3 C's: courage, character, and commitment. I was watching Micheál Mar Herzberg as he approaches his 90th birthday the other night on TV. Oh, I thought, no better example of the 3 C's: courage, character, and commitment. He was truly inspirational. And certainly when we're looking at leadership qualities, and I'm not going to go through these and bore you, you can see the type of stuff that I believe you're looking for. But the final one there, tolerance and humility. For those who know me, I'm not sure tolerance was my greatest attribute 10 years ago, but I'm now convinced more than ever that tolerance and humility are the key to developing successful businesses. And what do we mean by humility? Humility allows us to ask a simple question: how can we do things better? And if you think about it, it begins at the level of interpersonal communications, enabling an interactive, highly facilitated learning environment in which no one should be so stupid to think they have all the answers. Each individual is invited to contribute solutions to the challenges being posed. And we believe this is the key component of building sustainable competitive advantage through cultural cohesion. An interwoven culture and DNA of humility leads to innovation, increased self-knowledge, and greater character. Thus, for example, within our own organization, we have no meetings, no internal meetings, I can assure you none for the last 10 years, that doesn't have this item on the agenda called OFIs, opportunities for improvement. And I can assure you, some of the best things we have done, I thought were rather stupid, but because they were suggested, I felt I should try them out. And they've been fantastic, and they weren't my ideas. You know, Michael Porter, the business and academic guru, I think he gives a very good definition of strategy when he says, strategy is about making choices, trade-offs. It's about deliberately choosing to be different. So at PKF-FPM, and this is the same for any business, we endeavor to differentiate ourselves from our competitors. And the key to this, as I've said earlier, is not the what and the how. Don't tell people all about yourself. Actually, it's a very important skill, believe it or not. We've never produced a brochure, but it's a very important skill when you go into the room to shut your mouth and maybe use the words as we come to the next point, tell me. And therefore, it's rather the, you can see I can't spell, it's rather the why that's important. And why? Because why? Tell me what it is you're trying to achieve. Ask the client. You see sometimes inexperienced TV or radio interviewers, they actually give you the answer rather than let the person who they're interviewing tell you the answer. The focus should be on asking the right questions. I believe the 2 most important words are tell me. If you start off a conversation, tell me, you'll be amazed before you finish about all you learn. So people go into business and self-employment in my view because they think that the satisfaction and the income that they will derive from the business will enhance their quality of life and life experiences, indeed fulfill their dreams. Thus, why people hire us, or hire you by the way, is to help them succeed. And we believe that people will not hire PKF-FPM because they believe they understood or understand what we do, but rather they will hire us, or indeed you, because they believe you understand what they do. Those people don't buy our services, they buy the results and the benefits they perceive our services will bring them. And if you think about this, when their why and our why are the same, we have an engagement and we have business. Now, believe it or not, that ties in very well. Whenever I was starting off in 1991, there was a very good book. You could have read it in half an hour. I must have read it 100 times at different stages. Written by Fergal Quinn, unfortunately now deceased Fergal Quinn, Super Quinn. And he called the book Crowning the Customer. And believe it or not, he highlighted the concept of the boomerang principle. And I can think of, that was basically, what was the boomerang principle? The boomerang principle was you should always encourage the customer or the client to go back. Don't go for the quick bang. Don't go to rob the client. Don't charge too much on day one because they won't come back. Don't give them a rubbish meal because they may not say anything, but they'll not be back. The focus is to encourage the customer to come back. And I can think of one very prominent hotel in Wexford that I think at one time 75% of its residents or guests at any time stayed there the exact same week the previous year. In terms of differentiation and taking risks, we encourage people to endeavour, as I've said already, to be different and unique and to think outside the box. Now, this entrepreneurial spirit is consistent with our firm's clients, many of whom are business owners with unique products and services. But what we must acknowledge in that concept is that intelligent failure must be allowed in a mature society. Many people are afraid to fail, but we must discourage this culture. I urge you to discourage this culture. Because if you think about it, the person who never failed probably has never achieved anything. It's true, we don't like to lose, but we're not afraid to lose. And there is a difference. There's a very big difference. We don't like it, but hopefully we have won more than we have lost. And I can assure you, we've definitely learned more from our mistakes, than our successes. And we were talking about results. And again, maybe I'm a bit stupid, but over the years I've tried, I like to get concise things. I'm convinced that there are only 3 forms of benefits. And one of the hardest things we try to do, and we fail on many occasions, is to convert our motivation of helping people into benefits language. We're all great, at telling features, but if you think about it, lipstick. I haven't seen an advertisement for lipstick that told me how they made it, that told me whether it's ISO 9000 or whatever. I see a lipstick that tells you smile, happiness. It's the exact same with every business. You have to, in my view, get your product or your service and define it in terms of benefits. And I believe there's only 3 benefits. Now, I've heard people give lectures this for an hour, but to me, it's very simple. There's only 3. And it's very simple. What are they? The first benefit, does your service or product save time? Does it save money or make people more money? And finally, does it give people peace of mind? And I suggest to you perhaps a very interesting technique going forward, but please don't embarrass anybody, is the next time you see a business proposal or a tender from either your own organization or from one coming into you, have a look at it and see, does it highlight the benefits or does it spend all the time telling you about the features and the what and the how and not the why? Benefits and results are the why. So it's interesting to note that a recent international business survey confirmed that 80% of businesses today believe that talent and sourcing talent and retaining talent is the threat to growth. And believe it or not, even in the coronavirus and perhaps redundancies in the short term, I believe and share this view. We endeavour to recruit and retain the brightest and the best because in our experience and in observing other clients, a small team of A+ players can run rings around a large team of B+C players. Think about that. Good staff are never dear, and a good team player will be with you when you need them. So what about managing staff, managing talent? We call it team PKFFP, and that is working together, everybody achieves more. We believe it's vital to connect with people in conversations, give people confidence and empower them. You know, there's an old Indian proverb that says, show me and I may not remember. Tell me and I may forget. Involve me and I will understand. Eilish this morning showed me how to work these slides. It's my fault that they're not working right, but she involved me. She didn't tell me, she involved me. All staff need to demonstrate a desire, we call them not staff, warriors, and to mind their jobs, and to make a super effort to improve individual and team productivity and efficiency. No one in our organization has the title salesperson. Everyone's a salesperson. Our part-time cleaner has a business card. They're part of the team, they're part of the external bubble to promote the business. It is believed that the recognition of staff in a happy workplace offers favorable employee benefits, and this supports our firm's continued investment in training. Believe it or not, our absenteeism level has not exceeded 1.6% for 12 years. The most recent year, 1.54. Another thing that often amazes me, whenever I hear people complaining about competitors and jealous, what a load of rubbish. I believe we should learn from others, because the success of others should be a source of inspiration, not a source of fear. That's why we're so open. Obviously, people and culture initiatives have definitely come to the fore in recent years, and we've been no different organizations, and we have a number of different sample employee benefits, and I'm not going to go through them, but one I'll highlight in this slide is the last one. Believe it or not, we had a young female member of staff about 2.5 years ago, heading home, came into the office late at night after putting the children to bed, and she was heading home, and she got a puncture on a country road. And I swore within 24 hours that would never happen again to another member of staff. Believe it or not, one of the most effective employee benefits we've ever done. It hasn't been very dear. We've now arranged 24-hour crash breakdown on the island of Ireland and in Britain for any member of staff. Probably our most popular and one of our most used benefits in kind for staff. The other one I'll highlight is the second one at the bottom here. We're a bit old-fashioned. We're a family business. And to be upfront about it, spouses are invited to all office social events. So literally, it's an employee has the right to whether they wish to bring their spouse or partner, but it's their right, but they're always invited. They know to bring them, because we are very conscious that families support people when they're working, and it's really important that we help and create that family culture. And you know, if you think about sport, there's a lot of parallels between sport and business. Winning teams do the ordinary things with extraordinary consistency, commitment, passion and focus. And that's what we're really all trying to achieve. And I suppose in terms of modern organizations, it's fair to say there currently are three challenges facing us. Firstly, how to manage the millennials and the newest generation Z, dealing with environmental uncertainty, and finally, managing change, and obviously COVID-19 would fall in there. So, in terms of millennials and Generation Z, the young, vibrant, and experts, they're young, they're vibrant, they're experts of social media. We have found they demand a new approach from management with an emphasis on work-life balance and social responsibility, ethical policy. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't recall the last couple of years being asked in an interview, what is our ethical policy? What is our environmental policy? And they prefer collaboration as opposed to the old hierarchical structures. Now, this is difficult for some managers, we find in some client companies in particular, of older generations to comprehend, as they themselves took a different approach and grew up on a different approach during their formative business careers. But new structures, procedures, and business operations are required to embrace the changes of today and the modern world. A wider span of control with increased delegation, responsibility, shorter change of command, teamwork are essential to motivate millennials. You know, in the past, quite often too, in terms of appraisal, it was an annual appraisal or twice annually. We find today's young people, they want to know there and then, how did they do? And there is a requirement for continuous mentoring and coaching, providing regular feedback and opportunities and promotions, and an entire integrated and holistic people and culture approach. In terms of environmental uncertainty, well, we all know the world is continually evolving and unforeseen circumstances are arising at an alarming state, We certainly know that at present. And the economy, social demographics, politics, laws, growing regulation, climate change are just some examples of complex challenges facing modern organizations. But you know, it's back to that positive thinking we referred to earlier. Every challenge is also an opportunity. Think of Giuliani after 9/11. The businesses, organizations who concentrate on their own performance whilst, and this is the key sentence here, whilst demonstrating a peripheral vision of the external environment will succeed. You can't operate in an isolated bubble. You have to be conscious of what's happening around you. Now, whenever I was at university, given away my age, we used to do a thing called pest analysis for opportunities and threats, political, economic, social, and technological. That has now moved on and is called pestle analysis, which means you look at 6 issues, basically. How does political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal are the 2 new ones affect your business? And we do that personally on a quarterly basis. And we think it's really important to maintain a sharp focus and be aware of the volatile and uncertain environment we're operating in. You know, if I haven't convinced you yet, please let me convince you now. You cannot do today's jobs with yesterday's mindset. You cannot win today's All-Ireland when it comes with what was done 20 years ago. You can learn from what was done 20 years ago, but you know, as Charles Darwin said, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that is most adaptable to change. Change is difficult to implement, as people by their nature are often resistant to change and impede new ways of doing things. We've all seen that. You know, oh no, it's not right, it's not right. Well, I was fortunate to sit on a board with who I call a great, probably my hero in terms of business, inspirational leader for 6 or 7 years, Dr. Martin Naughton. And I can honestly say he never went through a meeting without 3 or 4 times referring to innovate or evaporate. And I can assure you, we've tried to bring that to business consultancy in any business, innovate or evaporate. He used to say they're making heaters now quicker, faster, but better than they were a year ago, 6 months ago. And eventually it was 3 months ago. So innovate or evaporate, they're key words, remember them. And to succeed, the underlying culture of any business or organization, it must be responsive. And culture is central to that behavior, as we've referred to earlier, and is the key determinant in the performance of an organization. It's the glue that links everything together, and it enables you to achieve your objectives. In terms of change, I think of it as having 3 pillars and 3 core elements. In terms of the pillars, focus on people, empower at all levels, and make change real. Oh, don't keep talking about it. I would far make the change, get it wrong, go back and correct about it, than keep planning and planning and planning to get it right and taking far too long to get it right. I would say real. To make it real, you got to move. You got to move with space, with speed. You got to move with pace. And then in terms of elements, yeah, it's all about hearts, vision and trust. It's in the mind, but it's about guts. Do we have fire in our bellies? Are we inspiring our fellow team members to have fire in their bellies? Remember, if you don't have fire in your bellies, you shouldn't be going to work. In terms of artificial intelligence, there's no doubt about it that artificial intelligence through machine learning is now becoming a key part of human development. It will change the way we live and the way we work. It will cause disruption to many sectors, but I think not necessarily destroy jobs. There will be an exciting future for those who embrace change. AI will result in new combinations of work, talent, skill requirements, work relationships, and new unknown jobs as of yet. But make no mistake about it, I come back to my core philosophy that life and business is all about people and relationships. And softer business skills, new thinking, continuous improvement, and curiosity will become more important. For example, robots will need to be retooled and updated for key information. People will be required. So I think we should see machine learning and AI as collaborators rather than competitors. Human plus machine collaboration will create sustainable, competitive, hybrid activity. And business, you know, like life, is just a game of inches. In either game, life or business, the margin for error is so small. And thus a united team with a common vision and purpose is required to deliver sustainable, superior performance and aggressive growth. Always remembering the power of one. Back to that famous word, team. Working together, everybody achieves more. Thus, within PKF FPM, we talk about team PKF FPM, and we seek that inch of improvement, both as individuals and as a collective team, in order to deliver marginal gains, recognizing that 100 things done 1% better will deliver cumulative, sustainable, competitive advantage and differentiation in the marketplace. Now, collective character, if you think about it, is vital to success. In our own organization, we believe that by focusing on getting the culture right, including diversity, the results will follow. Believe it or not, we've never sold anything. We don't sell it. We simply help people. We seek to encourage and deliver leaders at all levels throughout our practice, recognizing that the being of team begins from inside. Think about that. The being of team begins from inside you and inside your organization. High standards must come from within, because leadership works best when our team takes the lead and your team takes the lead. I said earlier, persistence beats resistance, and resilience is now becoming the new buzzword. Now, we're not perfect, I can assure you, and our commitment and perseverance will not be perfect. We're going to have setbacks and stumbles in pursuing any goal we set. But the important thing is, and let's pause and think about this, the important thing is not that we have these setbacks, but how we react to them. Perseverance and resilience doesn't mean perfection. It's not often constant, unwavering adherence to a commitment. Instead, it's usually a series of quick course connections when we go off track. If you think about it, running a business is like navigating a ship. It may go slightly off course, but with small corrective actions, we can redirect the business back on its desired direction and forward journey. So the practice believes that a united team with a common vision and purpose for what lies ahead is invaluable. And for this reason, great emphasis is placed on interweaving, on reconciling, on integrating personal career development plans with the overall practice and business development plan. By nature, if you think about it, our business, it has to be a win-win. We have to enhance people's career development wherever they may choose to be in the end when they're with us, and they have to add value to us when they're with us. And to put this bluntly and very simple, I believe staff can either be your ambassadors or your assassins. We don't have any brochures. In 30 years, we've never had a brochure. The reason for that is, I will tell you, as a young trainee accountant in KPMG in Belfast, a great firm, I say, were very good to me. I went for coffee. I don't drink for my sins. I'm a TT, but teetotaler. But I went for a drink of coffee with a friend on a Friday evening. I never forgot it. That particular day, he called his managing partner, excuse the language, and I'm not worse by the way, all the bastards of the day. And I suddenly thought to myself, how can he go back in on Monday morning and try and work for that guy? How can he go back in on Monday morning and try and convince other people to come and give their business to that organization? And for that reason, from that day on, I've always held the view, staff are either your ambassadors or your assassins. Forget about the brochures. If the staff don't think you care for them and don't like them, be aware you have a problem. It starts internally. You got to get your internal communications right. And we'll talk about that later on. As a result, we try to endeavor to make sure a staff member never hears anything on the street that they don't know about our organization. That's very tough, by the way. It means perhaps bombarding them now and again with emails, but we'd rather do it that way to make sure they're our first line of sales. In terms of people management and staff retention, I don't want to go into this too much today. I've talked about it in different ways, but we have in recent years used a thing called the people analyzer. And to put it bluntly, that's very simple. You're really trying to get the right people in the right seats. And we operate a thing called an accountability chart. And a very simple things, a very simple white page after every interview or every staff appraisal now. And we put this against our 6 core values and 1 or 2 other things. Do people get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do the job? And to be honest with you, you can only get a plus, a minus, or a hash. And if you don't get 3 pluses, you have a problem. And we've now introduced 3 strike rule. I have to be very careful in case all the HR people come after me. But we have never had a, touch wood, we've never yet had a HR issue. But the 3 strike rule, everybody knows about it. We have a little conversation and we tell somebody there, and strike 1. And in 4 weeks' time, we come back and we discuss how we're getting on. Did we agree what we're going to do in the previous 4 weeks? And then we get, if not, we go again, strike 2. And thankfully, so far, we've never made anybody redundant in 29 years. But that's not saying that some people haven't decided to leave us during that 12-week period. I can never understand. There's a particular client who I have the greatest admiration for. And I go to them every year. And I could nearly put the tape on before I go. Because they have a very successful business, but they have a very dominant person who happens to be the owner's sister. And every time I go in there, he says to me, oh God, you know, she's great, but nobody else can work with her. Oh, folks, if she doesn't get it, want it, or the capacity to do it, out, sack, quick, best decision you ever take. Encourage people to move on, because to be honest with you, they probably will make a very significant contribution elsewhere, where the culture is different, but albeit it could be the correct culture, but not your culture. Obviously, people-friendly policies are very important. Strong internal communications, we'll come back to slightly later. The how's it going we've talked about, and virtually just the coaching and mentoring that we've all talked about. And we, believe it or not, invest 11% of our turnover in staff development and training. But it's a funny coincidence. For the last 29 years, we've been in the top quartile of Irish accountancy and business consultancy firms in terms of profitability, despite the fact that the average spend is around 5 to 6% of turnover. So really what we're seeing here is emphasis on shared responsibility, internal communications, and continuous improvement. You know, if you think about it, to translate a Japanese proverb this time, none of us are as smart as all of us. We seek to develop not just exceptional accountants, but exceptional business leaders. In terms of achieving your goals, as I already referred to, we use a system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System as a facilitator. And we use a thing called a one-page, believe it or not, a one-page vision traction organizer. And on this one page, this is our entire plan. Every member of staff is this is just that one page. This one page incorporates our vision, our core values, our core focus. Core focus is the why. It also includes our 1, 3, and 5 year targets. It also includes our, more importantly, what does it look like? What do we expect it to look like? And it's really important to get that all down on one page. And believe it or not, you'll find not an easy thing to achieve, but we have found it very helpful. Yes, we do have annual key performance indicators, but wait for it. The most important decision we've taken is actually we operate on 4 90-day clocks. We call it ROCs, because we find that people, 13 weeks is actually quite a short period. And that certainly after 1 quarter, people get the message very quick. If their name's against a rock and it hasn't happened, it's called peer pressure, a little bit of embarrassment. Why is it not done? So we operate the business on 90-day clock called ROCs. And you know, in terms of sport, if you think about it, you've got to practice to deliver, and don't practice to practice. We've all seen the people that are great in training, but they're not great in the match. You've got to psychologically, the only reason you're practicing is to deliver. And probably the key to your performance is what you do in the training ground. I referred to the mirror earlier on, and I have always said that I think the best piece of equipment that any individual or any business can have is the mirror at home. It doesn't cost too much. Because I honestly believe if you can look at the mirror at home this evening and say, I gave it 100% today. Many things may have gone wrong, but if you give it 100%, you can have no regrets. So I believe that a big part of any team effort is personal ambition. We need highly motivated and ambitious individual winners to create team success. Think of the football teams. Think of the Dublin team at present. But no solo runs. We require 100% commitment at all times. To put it another way, work should be a distraction. You're entering the smiling zone. Don't come to work and don't go to work unless you're willing to smile. I share Steve Jobs' view that the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Success starts with a passion, but successful, passionate leaders are a living example of their vision. They don't just talk about it, they do it. And as I was preparing for this talk today, I started thinking, I think sustainable business is a bit like riding a bicycle. We've got to keep pedaling because if we stop, we'll fall off. Thus, we must keep moving forward and never be complacent with people and talent management. We need to retain a constant state of nervousness and focus on relevance, sustainability, and trust. Believe it or not, that sense of nervousness brings me back again to Martin Naughton. I remember asking him one day after he gave a phenomenal presentation. I said, how do you do that? He said, my mother taught me when I went to the face one time that it was always good to have a wee sense of nervousness if you were going to perform well. And I believe that's key. If I didn't feel nervous this morning, I don't know whether I performed well or not, but I can assure you I was nervous before I started. So the current COVID-19 pandemic is temporary, and certainly from a PKFF perspective, we hope we will have an exciting, albeit re-engineered future, anticipating changes in consumer behaviour and attitudes. I think there's no doubt there will be significant changes in the business landscape in terms of attitudes, behaviours. But the reason why we approach the future with confidence is because our core business model, present and future, is people-focused. And it's all about attracting the best people and then developing and managing that talent, as we've said so often, and integrate it throughout today's presentation. And we believe going forward that this core, proven and successful strategy will deliver market differentiation and benefits to clients and give us a competitive edge. As a team, we will not panic. We will endeavour to improve each other and indeed inspire each other by demonstrating courage, resilience, and agility in very uncertain times. And as you think about it, as a species, we are vulnerable, but thankfully, hopefully, also innovative, resourceful, and capable, as this webinar series demonstrates. By staying positive and strong, we believe Team PKF-FPM, or your organisation, working together with a united determination and vision, can overcome any challenges that arise and ultimately succeed. To conclude, collective character is vital to success. If you think about it, it's the high standards, it's the 3 Ps, the purpose, people, and practice, and they must come from within. And equally, if you think about it, and Giuliani was a key example of this. Prior to 9/11 in New York, he didn't have the most auspicious career, and one might say he didn't have it after. But I'll tell you one thing, for a few years after, people admired his quick corrective action, as it was perceived. So think about this. Sometimes we cannot control the events around us, 9/11, coronavirus, but we do have the ability to choose how we respond. And it's on how we respond that we will be judged. And more importantly, our organizations will ultimately perform or not. So as sure as night follows day, individuals make choices every day. Individual actions matter and can be a force for change. Let's try and make every moment count, because I believe that passionate employees desiring to serve and help clients succeed creates long-term value, LTV, to clients, profit and market differentiation and premium. So in very simple terms, thank you for joining me this morning. It's onwards and upwards, And always remember, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, and before I go into what he said, remember our current circumstances do not determine where we go. They merely determine where we start. And he said, the time is always right to do what is right. So after Dennis's presentation, I look forward to taking part in a question and answer session. And thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you so much, Fergal. That was absolutely brilliant. I've a sore hand here from taking copious notes. I definitely learned a lot and a lot to digest and a lot to think about. I know Michael Bosnay is a big fan of bite-sized insights. That's the whole philosophy of his consultancy practice. And I think your talk this morning was just absolutely littered with that. So many touch points, so many really valuable reflections, I suppose, for people to consider. So thank you so much for that. I particularly liked the tell me principle, the importance of listening, and it really, I suppose, hammers home again the theme we've seen over the last number of weeks, and that is the importance of people and the importance of relationships. So, you know, that need to listen. There are a few questions coming in for you. Do you want to take a couple now, or do you want to wait until afterwards?
I'm more than keen to do either. I don't mind. I'm more than willing to take any now.
Okay, well, there's a couple here in relation to your weekly pulse survey, actually, which might be a relatively quick one for you to answer before Dennis comes in. And just people are really interested in it, I suppose. I thought it was fascinating when you mentioned it. But they're asking, one, what's the response rate? So are you getting a good response rate? Or are you having to deal with survey fatigue? Do you find that people get sick of having to do it every week? And then another person, Kevin, is asking whether employees give their names in that survey, or is it anonymous? And how do you follow up on those in difficulty? So that's...
Yeah, since 2015, our average response rate has grown every year, and the average this year was 83%. Now, what the other question was, yeah, it is anonymous, but what happens is we have 5 offices and we have 4 core service lines. So literally, you're divided within 3 groups. You're divided on your office location, you're divided on your core service activity, and you're also divided in your level position within the organization. So at the end, on a weekly basis, I get the average score and participation rate for every office, and then for each team, and also for each level of staff. And in terms of the comments, yes, can be very positive a lot of the times, but they equally can be very cutting. But they are anonymous, and it's coordinated independent. What happens is we do it at 9 a.m. on a Thursday and Friday morning, and the results are then available to me. They're sent to me from Nottingham. A firm in Nottingham coordinates it for us. At 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, I deliberately don't look at them to a Sunday evening. And then, to be honest with you, I take responsibility of reading the survey and sending it out to my senior management colleagues, and highlighting actions that I think, from what I've read, they have to do. I suggest they consider following up, and they have to report back by Wednesday lunchtime how they've got on. So literally, people will know immediately, which is the key to it. That's why the response rate is so high. People, we may not agree with what they say, but people will know we have listened, and we will go and either debate, not with the individual, because we don't know who the individual is, but with a debate. But some of the things are fantastic. Some of them could be, I'll be honest with you, just before we went off, excuse me for making this point, somebody was disappointed with the quality of the toilet paper in the Belfast office. And somebody else wanted hand towels rather than, for example, what do you call it, you know, the wall, the heater on the wall, hand dryer.
Yeah.
So you'd be like, these things vary from all things. You know, the week just gone by, there was a comment, for example, on remote working, and somebody did a quiz and different things. But you know, it really is. It's amazing how, in a quick glance, like I wouldn't know something was happening, say in our Dublin North office or whatever. Whew, all of a sudden, there's an issue. You know, what is that about? And you can immediately get in very quick with. It's not the be and all that, but it's a very quick, effective way of finding out what's going on and giving people the right anonymously to make comments.
Yeah, it strikes me as a really powerful tool for sense making.
It's a pulse survey, you know.
Yeah, exactly, for just getting the mood music, if you like. So I hope that answers your question, Kevin, and others that have posted on it. And then there's one other question on managing millennials. Not too surprised to see this pop up. So the poster says that they have found millennials resistant to management. So how do you get the balance right between steering their work and keeping them engaged?
Well, I'm not sure we get it right all the time, but what we put a major emphasis, it's funny, and we think it has helped, we've done this virtually since inception, but we think it has helped particularly millennials. We do a thing, we encourage all staff to complete a thing called organisation analysis. And what that is they have to list what they do outside of work. And believe it or not, because we believe if you don't care outside of work, you won't care inside work, you won't help. So literally, we're looking for people who volunteer, and we're looking for people who's the team captain or the Help and Salvation Army or something, etc. But the one thing we picked up with millennials is they're very big into corporate social responsibility. So what we do is, to be fair, we keep an eye out on what they're saying they're doing, what they like to do, and we encourage them to actually take active leadership roles within their CSR sphere. And we find that building up that confidence in whatever they're doing, whether it be football or whether it be drama or whether it be helping people or whether it be football, that they then bring that back. And believe it or not, the relationship built by explaining to them and encouraging them to do so much out of work means they bring those cultures back into work, and it creates better teamwork. So that's one of the things we've done. I think, to be fair, we have to also acknowledge that, maybe everything we did, not maybe factually, everything we did in the past wasn't right either. And, we've got to be realistic. It's always good to have diversity. It's always good to have a bit of difference. And, as I say, 6 forwards never won a match in rugby or anything else. And, a goalkeeper, you won't win a match with 15 goalkeepers. So you have to have different people. And I think diversity creates culture, it creates enthusiasm. And I love having young people around me, to be honest with you.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I'm doing a bit of research at the moment into decision-making processes, and one of the key factors that contributes to successful decision-making is cognitive diversity among the team. So the wider the range of experiences and inputs and perspectives that you get, the more likely you are to scan the wider range of options and make a more effective choice. So yeah,
like, for example, you're 100% right. And, I didn't appreciate the time, but one of the things I know that helped me greatly in hindsight, looking back, whenever I was about 18, I was chairing a committee, football committee. And there was a lot of people older than myself on that. I subsequently then went to work after KPMG in the Industrial Development Board, similar to IDA in the South and now Invested in the North. And I found myself that actually all my subordinates that I was managing were all older than me. But actually I didn't find a problem. I didn't realize that because I had been in that environment on quite a few occasions. And I do think it really is important to encourage people to get proactive in what they love doing, because if you like doing it, you can then bring that back in and educate and empower and inspire other people.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, on that note, we have a few other questions, but we might save them for later because I think some of them will apply to you and Dennis. So I'm going to bring Dennis in there now and let you get yourself set up, Dennis. And thank you very much, Fergal. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Sure, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Fergal. Follow that. I think you've stolen some of my thunder there, but I think as long as we're on the same page, that's going to be the important thing. I've got a feeling here, actually, I may well have spelt your name incorrectly, which is a real slap on the wrist, because I'm always having a go at students for attention to detail. So I'm sure I got something from you which had your name spelt. I have a friend who spells it without the A, so that's my excuse. And when my son was a little boy, he used to love this baseball hat. He's only 3 or 4 and he'd only just probably started to read. But it had on it, nobody's perfect. I'm nobody. So I'll start with that as my introduction. Okay. So these are some thoughts from me. We've had, I think, some fascinating insights there from Fergal, who's been a practitioner for many years, And I suppose, you know, even though I have my own background, I'm coming more from the academic perspective. So you have a kind of mixture, if you like, of theory and practice. G.D. agus tá fáilte rábhiniu. I'd like to start or every day to have a few words of Irish. In fact, I can actually blame Fergal for this really, because I attend the GAA Irish language course in Downings in the Donegal Gaeltacht every year. It's where my mother's from. And we kind of make a commitment that we will use Irish every day when we're on that course. And I find that even on a Dublin bus, if you say "Gara Mila Maigat" to the bus driver, I guarantee to raise a smile. Anyway, as I said there, you know, I've been learning Irish. You know, for me, it's a motivating factor, and it's one of the things that adds meaning to my life. Several years ago, a guy called Herzberg, a psychologist, who was looking into the whole field of motivation, he came to the conclusion that there are two types of motivating factors, and they're quite separate. There are hygiene factors like pay and conditions, which, if not addressed, are very demotivating. So, you know, if you work in a place where you don't get paid very well, if it's cold, if the washrooms are dirty and so on, that's very, very demotivating. But then on the other hand, once they're solved, they don't really motivate you. The other types of motivational factors are what he called motivational factors, and they're things like your work providing you with a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, achievement, personal enrichment. Well, I'm not going to dwell on the hygiene factors. If you're not paying your staff properly, if you don't heat the building, you don't provide clean washrooms or tea and coffee, well, quite frankly, you're living in the world of the Gombe man and Ebenezer Scrooge, not the 21st century. And you'll probably regard anything that Fergal is, the misspelling, anything Fergal has said, or I'm about to say, is airy-fairy, namby-pamby nonsense. And quite honestly, hygiene factors are something that can be solved very easily. The kinds of factors that I'm going to look at, the motivational factors, they're ones that you really have to kind of think about. They're harder because they come from within people. Those hygiene factors are things that are external. I think it's worth saying here that Herzberg's theory has since been questioned by other psychologists, but that's academics for you. I mean, what motivates them is a chance to disagree with another academic. But most of my lecture now will focus on the second type of motivation. There's basically just a little slide. I wish I had more of I must ask Fergal actually how you get that little man on the bike, because I'd like to get some movement into these presentations, particularly for my millennial students. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it goes without saying that we're clearly not where we want to be at the present time. The pandemic has been catastrophic for some businesses, and particularly, I think, for many small and medium-sized enterprises, which rarely have big reserves of capital to fall back on. You've probably heard the story of the visitor to the west of Ireland who asks an old man for directions, and he gets a reply, well, if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. And that's probably how a lot of us are feeling right now. Perhaps one small positive is that we get an unexpected opportunity to take a long, maybe too long, hard look at ourselves, at our businesses, and perhaps do some reflecting and some thinking about what we might be able to do better in the future. Fergal has rightly pointed out that the most important asset in your business, any business, is its people. People, not just with those with whom we work, but you know, our family and friends. They bring us the greatest happiness in our lives, but they can also be the cause of the biggest headaches as well. And leadership, of course, is about working with people and getting the best from people. When I tell people that I teach leadership and management development, one of the first questions I'm often asked is, well, what's the difference between leadership and management? Now, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of books written on this subject, but I'm going to try and keep things simple. You know, I may be accused for simplifying things, but I think at its simplest, we can say that management is about stuff. It's about ensuring that things get done in time, on time, that they get to where they need to go, that they're up to measurable standards. And to an extent, people are often included in that as stuff. I mean, you know, we hear terms like human resource management, which replaced, when I started work, it used to be called personnel management, but both of which I believe tend to lump people along with other resources like money or time or materials or machinery. But people are very different, and leadership is clearly different, differentiates people from everything else in an organization, because it's about relationships, and it's about a particular relationship. A leader is defined by having a follower or followers. I mean, there's no such thing as a leader without a follower. You know, if you have no followers, well, you're not leading anybody. I'll refer as we go along to, you know, to some of the people that have some academics, but you know, their experience is often or their practice is often informed by experience. A good manager does things right. A leader does the things right, does the right things. That's from Bennis and Goldsmith. And what they mean by that is that, and again, this is a simplification, but managers tend to be rule-driven, leaders tend to be values-driven. You know, there's that little thing there, do the things right or do the right thing. Managers may focus on systems and tasks, where leaders focus on people. You know, the how and the when as compared to the what and the why. You know, doing what's safe rather than taking innovation or risk. Doing what we've always done, or maintaining things rather than developing. Control rather than trust. A short-term focus rather than longer-term focus. It's maybe easier for leaders to take a longer-term focus, particularly if you're the owner of an organization. You know, managers can be risk-averse. Again, things like accepting the status quo rather than challenging it, looking to the bottom line rather than to the horizon, where really your longer-term profit is, imitating rather than originating, going by the book rather than being your own person. And very often managers can focus on what they can, on the concrete, on the contract. Whereas with leaders don't want to force people to follow, and followers should be voluntary. Another book which some of you may be familiar with, because it's a huge seller in the leadership field, is Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Covey makes the point: management is efficiency in climbing the ladder of success. Leadership determines whether the ladder is leaning against the right wall. In other words, you know, taking the bigger picture. There are a couple of slides here which I'm not going to dwell on. You can you'll be able to see these things, you know, afterwards if you want to take another look. But on the whole, the managers are, let's say, more reactive to situations, whereas leaders are looking for the longer term and more proactive. And this is, you know, there's much the same kind of ideas there, which really support that little graph which I gave you earlier on at that slide from Bennis and Goldsmith. Another academic, McGregor, took the view, really, he doesn't say here necessarily management versus leader, but on the one hand he called it theory X and theory Y. There are theory Y, theory X people take the view that the average person dislikes work and will avoid it if he or she can. That most people need to be forced to work with the threat of punishment, or even with rewards, you know, monetary rewards generally. And the average person prefers to be directed. They want to avoid responsibility. They're relatively unambitious. They want security above all. They want to get the job done and go home. Theory Y, on the other hand, which is a more participative management style and which is much more like leadership, takes the view that effort in work is as natural as work and play. That you know, as we get older, we play less, but that we get we get a feeling of meaning, a sense of purpose from work. That people will apply self-control and self-direction in pursuit of organisational objectives without being forced to do things, or without being kept an eye on all the time. I mean, I find one of the most annoying things is if you've got somebody looking over your shoulder. I'll say this again, but I think I'm sure we've got a range of small, medium, and small and medium enterprises here. But if your business is very small, there's always a real danger of micromanagement, because you have a small team, you're likely to kind of keep an eye on what they're doing, and that can be that can become quite soul destroying. To continue with this theme here, achieving objectives is often reward enough for motivated staff. People generally accept and actually seek responsibility. The capacity to use imagination, ingenuity, creativity in solving organisational problems is not the reserve of the senior managers. It's not the reserve of the boss. It's widely, not narrowly distributed throughout the population. In industry, the intellectual potential of the average person is only partly utilised ever, and most of our organisations simply do not get the best out of people. The relationship between leadership and management, well, both sets of skills are important, but business leaders generally have management skills, but not all managers have leadership skills. There are many similarities, but leaders tend to be, if I go back to that earlier slide, they tend to be more strategic, more visionary. They set the culture and the values of the organisation. I mean, Fergal has made has emphasised those points, and they're the things that I want to look at today. I want to look particularly at vision, mission, which is closely aligned to that, and the values of your business, your organisation, wherever it is that you work. And Stephen Covey reinforces that. A couple of the habits that he has in his book is, that the habit 2 is really about a vision, and habit 3 is about your values. I think if you're going to put yourself in the position of taking responsibility for other people's livelihoods, which is what business leaders do, then you need to be very clear about what your own personal values are. I'm going to say a little bit here about values. The Dalai Lama says, open your arms to change, but don't let go of your values. Values should be the bedrock of what you do. We all face tough decisions every day, but leaders' decisions affect the lives of others. The success or failure of organizations and businesses sometimes have unforeseen consequences. Therefore, knowing that you've acted for the best and have been true to your values and principles, they may not make a bad outcome better, but you will be able to explain and stand by your decisions. When our actions and our words are aligned with our values, life is generally good, we feel content, we feel confident and satisfied. But when our behaviours do not match up with our values, we're likely to have a feeling of unease, which tells us that all is not good with the world right now. And we use terms like, we feel out of step, out of touch, out of line, out of sorts. And we all have those feelings. And I think we all know that when we feel that we're not doing the right thing, we get this feeling in our gut. So I would ask you to make a deliberate and conscious attempt to identify which values are the most important to you. And if you do that, it can keep your anxiety levels low. It can increase your sense of well-being, your sense of personal worth, and your sense of self-awareness. All of these are elements of another thing which Fergal made a very strong point about is emotional intelligence. So some of the things that we think of as values are not really values at all. They maybe are just ideas or notions or even prejudices. In other words, things that we haven't investigated, that don't actually bear scrutiny. Real values, I'm talking about things like honesty, integrity, respect for others. These are universal across time and across cultures. But to be really clear what our values are requires some thought. And There's a sheet which will be available at the end of the lecture, and you can take it away with you and just spend a little bit of time with it if you like. And it might help you to come to some conclusions about which values are important. It can be quite good to actually prioritize your values. Is this one more important to me than, is one more important than two, and so on. There are no right or wrong answers here. We're all different. We all have different values, different priorities, but knowing your values will help you make decisions as future leaders and managers, and indeed in your ordinary daily life. For example, if family is a value for you, but you have to work a 70-hour week, or maybe you work a 70-hour week out of choice, or you work away from home a lot, that's going to set up an internal conflict. If making money to you is important, you might think the family is your #1 value, but if the last time you spent the day with your kids was on your summer holiday, well, maybe you're kidding yourself. So be honest with yourself when you go through this little questionnaire or survey about your values. Perhaps your business is the thing you value most in life. When you've started something yourself, when you founded something yourself, when you've worked hard at it, it would be surprising if it wasn't extremely important to you. Does your family share the same feeling? Do your employees share the same feeling? If you think of your business as your baby, it can make it difficult for others to share that passion or to even feel included. And yet, like it or not, they will share it. Your family will hear you talking about it endlessly, possibly. Your employees will be doing a lot, maybe the lion's share of the work that goes on, but they may not feel a sense of involvement or a sense of being included in the business, especially if they feel their ideas are not listened to or their opinions are not valid. And again, I'm supporting here very much a lot of what, everything in fact that Fergal said earlier. A couple of other academics, Kouzes and Posner, they interviewed over 20,000 people across the world. So these kinds of values are universal, asking what were the qualities or values that people looked for and admired most in a leader. And the top 4 answers were honesty, being forward-looking, being inspiring, and being competent. And what I want to look is, I'm going to focus on those 3 or 4 elements. Competence I won't spend very much time on. If you don't have a good knowledge of the business you're in, or the wit to bring in somebody who does, you're setting yourself up for failure. There are many businesses that you're maybe not an expert in, but you really need to then bring somebody in who is an expert. I'm sure you've seen some of these TV programs where Gordon Ramsay or Alex Polizzi, they look at failing restaurants or hotels, which have invariably been set up by people who've always fancied maybe having their own restaurant or their own hotel. It's kind of a dream for them, but they don't know much about the business they're in. Again, they often seem to be setting themselves up for failure. It's hard to get the respect of your employees if you don't know your business. So as I say, at the very least, you should have somebody in the business that you can rely on who does. But I'm not going to say any more about competence. Excuse me, I'll just take a drink of water. I think the most important, and it's the first of those values or qualities, is honesty. Excuse me. Being honest with yourself and with others is a hallmark of a good leader. Whether that's praising a team member for a job well done, or pointing out poor performance in an appropriate way, at an appropriate time and place. And I'll say a little bit more on that later. And I was delighted that Fergal mentioned his 3-strike process, because poor performance is something which, sometimes we shy away from, and it's one thing that you should not shy away from. And as Fergal was saying, very often it's better for somebody to be managed out of the business than to stay in the business. It's better for them, not just for the business. Now, closely related to honesty is trust. You will not be honest with other people if you don't trust them, and nor will they believe you if they don't trust you. And you'll only get honesty. I mean, there are things which are then linked to this. You'll only get honesty, and where there's honesty and trust, you then will get real communication. And communication is fundamental to leadership. Now, communication is rarely properly investigated. It's one of those words that we throw out. You know, we're all communicators. It's assumed we all know how to communicate, but real communication is hard. It's hard work. And you really need to communicate with your family and employees about the business and find out what they feel about it. And that demands a skill that very few of us have, and which takes a lot of practice and a lot of honing, and that's to actively listen. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a moment, but it's often said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, because we should spend twice as much time listening as we do talking. And it's rare, very, very rare that we do that. And of course, I'm not doing that now, but I'm afraid that's the nature of this particular beast. You know, I'll come back to honesty again. You know, it's the key. I mean, Fergal has mentioned emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is something which some people have, if you like, naturally without trying, but others have to try at it. And it's based on 2 characteristics. One is self-knowledge, and self-knowledge means being honest with yourself and you know, knowing the kind of person you are. As I think Polonius says in Hamlet, you know, to thine own self be true. Not always easy. And the second element is the ability to understand where other people are coming from. You know, we often call that empathy. And that demands being honest with them and really listening to them. You know, empathy often comes across as a kind of you know, a soft, wishy-washy kind of thing, but it's hard work, because empathy really means trying to understand where somebody's coming from, and that means really listening to them. You know, Fergal used that expression, you know, tell me. You know, that's encouraging somebody to. It indicates to them that you will be listening to them. The 5th habit that Covey came across, or that he puts across, is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And this is primarily about communication, which of its nature is 2-way. And Covey helps to explain this in a simple analogy: diagnose before you prescribe. So listen and clarify. The sister, if you like, to listening is clarifying, and that's confirming what you think you've heard. You know, very often we hear something we think we've heard because we invest our idea of what's going on in what somebody has said. I often do an exercise with students where we get people to pass a message around, and that message changes as it goes from one person to another. So clarifying things it's part of the process of listening, that you've really heard what somebody said and not assumed what they've said. And these 2 things are essential skills for developing and maintaining positive relationships in all aspects of life. This isn't just this is in our own personal life as well. You know, at home, you think you've heard what one of your children has said, or what your spouse or your partner has said, and you know, very often you get that wrong. And they're at the heart of empathy and emotional intelligence. If you only take one thing from what I'm saying today, it's that listening and clarifying. Stephen Covey rightly says that most people do not listen with the intent to understand; they listen with the intent to reply. You know, next time you're in a conversation, I mean, it could just be, you know, if you're in the pub with somebody, you know, very often we just can't wait to get our point in. We're not listening to what the person has said. We just want to get our point across. You know, you could be talking about sport. You could be talking about, you know, how a team has done. And very often you're not listening at all to the person and what they're saying. You just want to get your point in. you know, again, to come back to what Fergal was saying, that people are our most important capital, but very few leaders or managers spend the time on them that is necessary to get the best out of them. I mean, I come back to what I was saying earlier, because people can be hard work. They're owners of shops who spend hours reviewing their stock or their window displays or talking to customers, but they spend only a few minutes talking to their staff. They're restaurant owners who agonize over their menus, but expect new waiting staff to be up to speed on their first evening. Office managers, got managers there, office managers who rarely venture from their offices. If you don't know your staff, if you don't know their strengths and weaknesses, what they enjoy doing, what makes them anxious, how can you ever expect to get the best out of them? It's like, you know, let's say you've got 4 people in a team. They're all different. Like, you know, you might have 4 cars, a sports car, a family estate car, a Mini and a van, but you're treating them all as if they were a Ford Focus. You've got to be a little bit careful here, because you don't want to pry. But I thought Fergal's point about the getting people to tell their managers and to other people in their team, you know, what it is that they do outside of work, really is a way of including and understanding people. As I say, you know, you can't force people. Some people want to keep themselves very, very private. And I'll say a little bit about that later on, because there are one or two theories about that. But I'll just give you an example. I had somebody in my team, and she was coming in late. She was having a bit of a hard time. And, you know, I'd said, look, you know, is there a problem? And she didn't want to tell me initially. And I said, look, you know, I can't really help unless you tell me what's going on. And it turned out that her mother hadn't been well. She was having to, her mother had broken her ankle, actually, Fergal. She was an older woman. So she had to help her out. She had to get her breakfast in the morning, and she was finding it difficult to get into work on time. And I said, well, why didn't you tell me? You know, we can deal with that. And she said, well, when she worked previously for Sky Television in London, and she had an Australian manager. And before she came home to Ireland, actually, her father had died. She had to take time off. She took a week or 10 days, I think, and came home. And when she came back to work, you know, the manager said, oh, you know, where have you been? She said, oh, you know, my father died. I said, oh, I don't want to hear about your personal life. You know, don't bring that stuff in here. Which is incredible, really. Anyway, Stephen Covey talks in his book about the value of a paradigm shift, something which causes us to rethink our view of the world, or how we've been doing things for years, perhaps. He uses the apparently true story of a US battleship commander. I actually saw this recently on WhatsApp, and it suggested it was it actually happened in Irish waters, but Stephen Covey's book was written quite a while before the story was meant to have happened in Ireland. And it was a battleship commander, and he signals to a vessel ahead, you know, change your course 15 degrees south. And the reply came back, you change your course 15 degrees north. You know, no, you have to change your course 15 degrees south. No, you have to change your course 15 degrees north. And he said, I am a US battleship. And the reply came back, I'm a lighthouse. So the point of that is that there are, you know, we can see the world in a certain way. It's a little bit like the business of listening with a view to not understanding, but with just getting your point across. Here's just a little activity for you. Can you see the hidden tiger in this picture? I'll just leave it up for a moment or two. Some of you may have come across this exercise before, but I'll take the opportunity to get a drink as well. Anyway, the hidden tiger. The hidden tiger is, if you look at the stripes on the tiger, can you see the words, the hidden tiger? And again, this is a kind of a paradigm shift thing, that we can assume that something is the case, or we, I think it's partly, through our educational system, we encourage people to be convergent thinkers, which is important. A lot of the maths and the English and so on, and the writing that we do encourages convergent thinking rather than divergent thinking, or to look a little bit out of the box. I was very fortunate in my time at Ofcom to be one of only 2 senior leaders from the North to be chosen to attend the US Federal Executive Leadership Program in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's a month-long program for senior executives in the US civil service, if you like. And amongst the many things I learned there was the value of knowing your team, but understanding your team, and also how important diversity is. One of the things we did was we did the Myers-Briggs profile test, which some of you may be familiar with it. I'll put up a little link to a kind of fun version. But basically what the Myers-Briggs thing is, it gives you an opportunity to see what are the sorts of things that are important to you and how you relate to other people. I say there are these kind of 16 different categories that you can end up as. But anyway, of the 40 odd people there, there were at one end of the spectrum, you can have people who are called ENFPs, and they're basically extroverts and big picture thinkers. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have ISTJs, and they are people who are more introverted and more likely to focus on detail. And one of the exercises, they put us into our different groups. And in my group, which was the ENFP, they gave us the same exercise, actually. They said, what do you do about a holiday? And the group that I was in, we said, well, you ring up the travel agent and book a holiday. Or, you're going away for a weekend, you get in the car and you drive to such and such, and maybe you book something on booking.com or book an Airbnb, and you head off. Or maybe if you're into camping, you get the camping gear and put it in the car and off you go. The other group, they came up with a list of about 40 different things. So, cancel the milk, put the dog into kennels, make sure the heating's off, set the burglar alarm. I mean, I can't remember how many, there were just so many. And what that showed me was that, we simply think, we look at the world in very different ways. All of us look in the world in very, very different ways. And when I came back from that course, I had a member of the team, quite a junior member. We used to run quite a lot of events, seminars, workshops, conferences. And I would often say, will you handle the kind of meet and greet stuff? And this young person, I think, used to be completely baffled. What is it I'm meant to do? And it was only when we came back and we all did a kind of version of the Myers-Briggs thing, I realized that I'll call her Kira, it wasn't her real name, that she was a completely different, she was this opposite to me. And I was simply confusing, giving her instructions that were completely confusing. What she wanted and what she needed was a list of things to do. And I mean, that was illuminating for me, because obviously we're all very, very different and we see the world in different ways. And that's why it's so important that I'll come back to that earlier take about listening and clarifying. There's just a little fun version that you can get online. Don't take it too seriously. When you do the Myers-Briggs test, you should have a psychologist or an HR specialist who's trained in how to deal with the test, how to help you undertake it, and also how to respond to it. So this is just a fun version. But what Myers-Briggs does, it flags up the fact that we all have different personality types. Leaders and managers need to be flexible and be able to adapt their behavior to different situations, to different people. what I call horses for courses. I'm going to put up a couple of slides on what's called situational leadership, because we're all different. For leaders and managers, the key learning is that people are different. They react to situations differently. And for a leader or a manager, you need to be aware of that in order to be able to respond to people in a correct way. Here's just a little kind of model of this, that some people in the might need, if we look at the bottom right hand one, a lot of directing. This is likely to be somebody who's who's young and new to the job. They want quite a lot of direction. They don't want to be supported and let go on their own. They want you to tell them what to do. A little bit like the case that I was talking about, because this was not only somebody who's different to me in personality type, and a different way of seeing the world, they're also much younger and less experienced. And then if we take the bottom right, there's a curve there, but the bottom left, there are people who've been in the job a long time, they know what they're doing. There's nothing more annoying for them than somebody who is saying, have you done this? Do you know how to do that? And very often when people come into new teams, they can be over prescriptive, over directive. They can micromanage. There's a little slide here, and it more or less says what I've been saying there, that the more experienced somebody is, the less direction they'll need. The less experienced they are, the more direction they need. And likewise with the task. If the task is complicated, well, then even more experienced people might need more direction. If the task is quite easy, the last thing you want is somebody looking over your shoulder. Here's just a couple of little things that you can take for your, take away. Mary, she started to come in late, especially on rainy days. She lives on the other side of town. She's an experienced team member, crucial to your operation. You ask if there's a problem, she tells you she's struggling to get on in time. She has 3 school children, 1 with special needs. So they go to different schools. She's split up with her husband. What do you do? I mean, that's a little bit like my team member whose mother had fallen ill. I simply said, look, you don't have to come in at 9 o'clock every morning. Let's find a way that we can get through this. Are there days when you wouldn't have to come in at all? You could work from home. The next one, the second one there, Ryan's a 22-year-old. That should be old. The S should be next to it, but the R anyway. He's only started with you he's only started recently. He's been late on average once a week, usually on a Monday. He lives within walking distance. What do you do? And I think here you're into Fergal's 3 strikes. This is poor performance. It's not acceptable, and you need to ensure that it stops. This can sometimes be called tough empathy. Managing employees with tough empathy is a difficult but key quality. It means giving people what they need, not what they want. Certainly, leaders must empathize passionately but realistically. And you've got to be straightforward with people. So never ignore poor performance or misconduct, but deal with it appropriately. It's one of the things which many managers avoid like the plague. But one of the things that Fergal said right at the very end is, sometimes you need to be courageous. You don't want to. It's like doing these presentations. You may feel a bit nervous. You simply just have to bite the bullet. And one thing employees, in fact, all of us, value above all else is fairness. They want a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. They want to see everybody abide by the same rules. If someone's seen to be getting away with slacking or with poor performance, it undermines the credibility of the values that you espouse or you claim to espouse. It undermines any rules that you've agreed, and rules should be agreed with people. And it undermines your credibility as a manager or a leader. I'd like to use this example with students. Ernest Shackleton, the famous Irish explorer, actually was born and brought up in Kildare, was a leader who, for B.W. Browning, who wrote a book a leadership book based on Shackleton. He epitomizes the ability to respond to different people in different situations. He uses Alfred Lansing's book, Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, to put it forward as illustrating some of the key theories about leadership. I don't know, but you know the story about Shackleton. His expedition was aiming to cross the Antarctic from sea to sea. But what happened was his ship, the Endurance, the aptly named Endurance, it was caught in the ice and crushed by the ice. The 27-man crew was stranded on the ice then. The mission to cross Antarctica was a failure. However, it was also an incredible success because over a 2-year period, Shackleton was able to keep every single one of his men alive and get them all home. I mean, one of the things he did, he and Tom Crean from Kerry, who you may have used to be on the Guinness ad, they rowed a boat to the nearest land or the nearest island. He then had to climb a mountain and get to a whaling station, but with the end result that all the men were rescued. And one of the men called him the greatest leader that ever came on God's earth, bar none. And Shackleton's story illustrates many important ideas about leading in difficult times. He had unshakable optimism, which he communicated by word and deed. He was sure that he and his men would survive and be rescued. He didn't give up on that. He understood his men, their diverse needs and abilities, his team. He shared their hardships. He avoided easy solutions. For example, he assigned himself to a tent with the most cantankerous crew member to stop him causing trouble amongst others, which was a fact not lost on anyone else, except perhaps the guy in the tent. He treated his men equally, establishing only a loose hierarchy, which allowed them to draw strength not just from him, but from one another. All of the men, including officers and scientists, were expected to perform mundane chores. You know, and that was a type of thing that wasn't common. This is back in the, the early 20th century. Shackleton possessed ample social intelligence, understanding what made his crew members tick as individuals, and tailoring his interactions accordingly. So, you know, he flattered one guy, for instance, where with another one, he used tough empathy, reminding this guy who was complaining about the way things were going that he had signed a contract. So again, horses for courses. We mentioned competency earlier on. Shackleton was highly competent. He possessed incredible technical skills as a seaman, as a captain, as a navigator, honed over many years of exploration. He'd been part of Scott's team that had gone to the Antarctic as well. Last of all, and we can't all be this. I mean, he was lucky enough to be charismatic. His men looked up to him and addressed him simply as the boss or as boss, a term conveying their affection and familiarity as well as acknowledging his authority. You know, if we look at some of the leaders in the world, you know, some have charisma. I won't look at some of the present ones, but Martin Luther King, and Fergal mentioned him, Nelson Mandela, you know, they were people that had charisma. We look more closely in the election. I won't go into charisma now. We could spend a whole lecture on it. But he illustrated the point that we're only so good as in certain things, really, and we can't be perfect at everything, because on his return from the Antarctic, he tried a number of business ventures, all of which failed. And failing in itself, and Fergal, I think, made this point very well, failing is not a bad thing. You know, we often learn from failure. Sometimes we don't learn, but we often do learn from failure. One of the differences between Europe and the US, although it's changing now because of changes in credit, but generally speaking, for instance, you know, businesses that go belly up in the US are much more common. It's acceptable to go bankrupt. 10 or 15 years ago, there was something like 10 times as many bankruptcy cases in the US as there are as it were, in Ireland. As I say, it's partly to do with the availability of credit. There's just, there were quite a lot of photographs in that Lancing book about Shackleton's journey.
Dennis, I'm just conscious of the time, and I don't want to lose a few minutes for the questions and answers. So I know you've got a few more slides there in terms of kind of setting out a vision for your company, which I think are really useful touch points for people at the moment to go through. But we might let people do that through the slides, if that's all right with you, just so we can to get to some of the questions that have come in. Is that all right?
Yeah. Well, will I just shoot through that then?
Yeah, lovely. That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's, so people are different and we should respond to them differently. I'd mentioned this kind of very briefly. There's a theory about, LMX, leader membership exchange it's called, that subconsciously or even consciously, the people we work with, we put them into an in-group or an out-group. In-group people are people whom we trust, we like, we respect, we think are good at the job. We're likely to be friendly with them. I mean, it may well be that that we think they think like us, they support the same football team or whatever. And this can lead to reciprocal relationships and followers will be motivated. Out-group people are those that we don't trust. We maybe don't even like them. We don't have similar interests. And unconsciously, maybe we put them into what's called an out-group. That in itself will become demotivating for them. It may well be that they are not particularly good at the job, but is that something to do with me, or is that something to do with how I'm treating them? And there's a slide at the end which you can look at a little bit more closely on that. I've often noticed actually in interviews that when I've been in interviews, part of an interviewing panel, very often people they like people who are like them. So we often end up with teams of people who are very, very like us. And that lack of diversity means that you don't often get innovation. You don't get lots of ideas. I mean, in Silicon Valley, they go out of their way to try and get teams that are diverse so that people will work off each other. Empowerment is hugely important as a motivation, to give people responsibility. And it's one of the things that, I don't know if it's the same for you, but, to get a sense of empowerment is very satisfying. To be told that what you do is important, even critical to the health of a business, is empowering and confidence building. It seems extraordinary to me that many people are only now beginning to realize who the most important people are in our society. People we now call key workers, health workers, of course, but also the people who empty our bins, cleaners, those who ensure we have clean water, efficient sewage system, transport workers, postmen, supermarket workers, and so on. Let's hope that we don't forget them when all this is over. The key areas I was going to say, about were vision, and values. And to be forward-looking is the second of those qualities which are admired. Is to have a vision. You may well say if you've got a very small business, your visions and inspiration got to do with my business. I'm not Google, I'm not Dell. I had an MBA student whose response was exactly that. He was a manager of a small restaurant. There were other students in the class who worked for big multinational corporations. There were a couple of lads from the Irish Army. They could all lay their hands on the organisation's vision when we looked at vision. In fact, I was quite impressed by the two Irish Army lads who knew their vision, mission and value off by heart. But I suppose you would if, you had to lay your life down. But this guy said, well, we don't have a vision. And I said, yeah, but he said, we're too small to have the vision. And I said, well, not really. A vision is something which should drive what you do. And I said, I came up with a suggestion. Why couldn't your vision be something like to be the first choice for an evening out, lunch, or just a cup of coffee for people living, working, or visiting wherever it might be, Drumcondra, Swords, Ballyjames stuff. The vision needs to be realistic and meaningful. Often when I do vision with students, they say to be the best in the world. If you've got a small restaurant in a small town, you don't want to be the best in the world. You want to be just the best in that town. You should write your vision up. You should put it somewhere everybody can see it, because it's meant to be inspirational. If it isn't inspirational, if it isn't realistic, there isn't much point having it. That's just an example of a vision. There's a few more statements here. One of the good things about visions is they should be short. And then a mission statement. A vision is about the future, and a mission is about what we do now, how we do what we do now. You know, if I come back to that restaurant thing, it could be, we aim to give people an enjoyable experience with good food and wines at a reasonable price, with friendly service and a relaxing atmosphere. It's straightforward. And the values are something I've already mentioned. Values you really want to think about. You know, they could be in this situation: loyalty, flexibility, collaboration, respect for others, for our customers, for the environment, the honesty, you know, particularly in a retail type setting. You know, having values everyone in the team agrees upon, you know, is empowering. It's also something that you can call people out and you say, you know, how does that respond? How does that help with our vision? Is that in line with our values? But you also need to be willing to have people call you out. You know, that feedback business that Fergal was talking about, you know, it has to work two ways. And I wouldn't get involved in feedback if you're not prepared for it to work two ways, because, you know, people can be critical. And if you're not prepared to take criticism, you don't really want to hear that. And in small groups in particular, it'd be quite difficult, because it can be quite difficult for people to be anonymous.
I think that's a really good point, Dennis, on which to maybe bring Dennis in. Or sorry, to bring Fergal in if you're there, Fergal, because I think one of the key things with vision and the slides that we'll put up on the website, Dennis has some great examples of different companies, but it's really a great opportunity for companies to look at what exactly they want their vision to be. Like you say, sometimes for smaller businesses, they get caught up, and Fergal reflected that too, we get caught up in the operational rather than in the bigger picture. As Fergal said, you know, you need to work on the business and not just in the business. So I don't know, Fergal, if you're there, if you want to...
Yeah, no, I find Dennis's presentation fascinating, and I think what he's saying is right. I think the important of any vision is that it must be your vision. You know, it has to reflect what you want to achieve. And if that's what you want to achieve, that's the right vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a couple of questions coming in there that I don't want to miss. So I might just have a look. Actually, there's one for you first, Fergal, which is going back to something you said earlier about implementing EOS. And Bassi is just wondering, how long did it take you to fully implement, and what were the biggest challenges and learnings from implementing this system?
Well, even at this stage, I'm not sure we've fully implemented, but we got it quite quick. I think it's a culture thing, to be honest with you. It's very simple. That's why I like it. There's nothing sophisticated about it, but probably 6 months, 6 to 9 months. I mean, I'm not saying we implemented word for word, but the core concepts we like.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. And I suppose, Dennis, one of the questions coming in there is really looking at the area of how you start with a vision. So how would you look at the first steps in putting your vision statement together? Would you start with what motivates you, or would you look at what your business does?
Yeah, I think what you want to do is to start with what motivates you. You know, one of the things about being a leader is kicking things off. You may even want to come up with a vision, but you don't want to share that vision, because you really need to get buy-in. You know, it's no good saying, you know, what I want this company to be, you know, the best in Ireland. You know, that could be demotivating. You know, how can we be the best in Ireland? You know, there are only 10 of us, and you know, we don't have the investment of you know, compared to other kind of organizations. So, you know, you start with the vision, but then you share that vision, and you get people to you know, to comment, so you come up with something which is going to be an agreed vision. And while you're doing, in some ways, I think I would start with the values, as I was saying. You know, have a conversation about values. Decide, first of all, what are important values to you. You can share that with people. You can say, you know, what what are important values to you? You know, can we come up with some agreed values that that they are going to be the bedrock of our business? And then now, where are we going? Where do we want to be? And you can give it sort of timelines. You can say, where do we want to be in 10 years' time? You know, where do we want to be in 5 years' time? Where do we want to be in 3 years or 1 year? You know, how are we going to get there? It's a step-by-step approach. You know, you might have quite a big vision for 10 years' time, but realistically, where will you be on that journey in a year or in 3 years or 5 years? So I think, you know, you start, if you're the leader, you provide values, you provide an idea of a vision, but then get people to comment on it so you come to an agreed vision and agreed values.
Yeah, have you anything to add there, Fergal?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's also important we don't confuse best with biggest. You know, small can be best too. So I'm not totally opposed to the idea that you can be the best in Ireland or the best in the world and still be in a small town, because I think you can. And that's one of the advantages of one is, but I think that it doesn't necessarily mean the biggest, but you do have to have differentiation that would allow you, it's not what you think, it's what Joe Public thinks. And to be upfront about it, if so many people in Joe Public thinks you're the best, then you'll not be able to remain small for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I get a real sense from it that there's two things here. There's sense making. So there's the internal reflection and assessment of, you know, why do I do this? What are my values? What are my, you know, what's important to me? So what's the center of my world, I suppose. But then there's also a case of sense giving, that you need to bring people along with that you need to have, you know, a feedback, almost a cyclical thing where you're bringing your sense of the world to your team and getting their feedback.
Yeah, I think everybody's different. I think that's correct. Yeah. Sorry, Dennis.
No. I'd say absolutely. You know, your vision may well change. You know, if it doesn't seem to work or doesn't seem to be relevant, well, change it. Have a discussion. You know, what was wrong with that vision? Let's try and find, you know, one that's going to work for us. Because what often happens with visions is they end up stuck on a wall. Nobody looks at them. I mean, interesting enough, that group with the two Irish Army lads, they knew their vision. Whereas a lot of the people who work for big corporations, I'd say to them, what's your vision? They didn't know. They had to look it up. So they'd employed, you know, consultants to come in and give them this fantastic vision, but nobody used it. It wasn't relevant to the business. It wasn't relevant to the lives of those people working in it. What's the point of having it?
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be lived in the organization for it to actually matter or be a reality. Aoife has a question here for you guys, for the two of you. And yes, a good few people commenting on it. It's a pity in the time constraints because they're all enjoying both of your contributions. But Aoife, if it's the Aoife that's a regular joiner to our webinars, I know her business is actually going through quite a significant change period due to succession planning and so on. But her question for you is, do retailers need to change their vision for the next 12 months or more long term? So what kind of level of planning should they be at right now?
Go ahead, Fergal. I'll drop you in it.
Yeah, I lost you there for a second, but no, I think that we all have to change and be adaptable. But the bottom line is the core concepts of what made the shop or the business successful can still be successful, but it may have to be delivered and distributed or communicated a different way. But, you know, the core concepts are there. If you give good service in the past, if you had only one of a particular outfit instead of 10, you know, if you had something, whatever your core values were, yes, you will have to adopt them because of the changing social distancing arrangements. But make no mistake about it, the core values, underlying values of your business will be the same. You may use a different mechanism to find your customers and to secure your business.
Yeah, I think that's answered it really. You know, things will change, but I mean, this is important of being, you know, agile, that you can adapt to new situations. You know, if you are a shop, you know, how are you going to still keep your business going if social distancing becomes something which is, you know, mandatory? And you know, we've seen examples of that all over the place. I saw something at the weekend where there were communities that they do a dance out on the street, and they mark spots that are all 2 meters apart. So, you know, everybody can go out on the street and dance and have a kind of a party in a way that, you know, is different from before. So, you know, it's responding to change is, you know, a key feature of having a business that's going to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's just one question there for you, Dennis, from Darren, about getting in touch at some point, so we can arrange that.
Will you provide my Griffith email there?
Yeah, I will do. So Darren will be in touch after the webinar there. So guys, we did go over time a little bit, but I think it was valuable time and time well spent. Both sets of slides to reassure people, because I know there is a lot of content in there and a lot to reflect on. So those sets of slides will be put up on the website later today, as well as the recording from today, so that you can go back and revisit. And I think both sets of notes will help as a starting point for people as they try to reflect and think of these issues of leadership and empowering their people, and in particular that idea of working on the business and rather than just working in the business. And maybe this is the most opportune time for people to do that. I also love from Dennis's slides, you've got a nice little lockdown reading list there to get you going in terms of reading some material on leadership. So some really excellent suggestions. I haven't read them all, so I'm definitely adding to my list of books to read from that. So that's it for today.
You've got time, Eilish.
Sorry, Dennis?
You've got time now.
I've got time, yeah. Or I will have time soon, sometime next week maybe. So on that note, we'll finish up, guys, and thank you so much for your time today. Really, really insightful and so beneficial. So thank you both very much. And for our participants, we will see you on Wednesday for our webinar on strategy, which should follow quite nicely from what Dennis and Fergal were talking about today. So I hope to see you then. And until then, be safe and be well.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening in today.
Indeed, thank you very much. It was a privilege and a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. Take care.